What is your thoughts on big named companies collapsing out of nowhere?
More to come.
More to come.
Yeah, the issue with the industry was the race to the bottom. We were never bothered about being the biggest. We were like, longevity was always important to us. I mean, you were having people who were retaining their funded accounts for weeks and months to now days and hours.
Is imposing limits on daily gains a necessary measure for sustaining prop firms in the industry?
Cool. So, okay, let me give you a top-down view to start with, and then eventually I'll answer the question. But so what's happened in the industry is we've seen a huge amount of toxic traders sort of come. You mean you were having people who were retaining their funded accounts for weeks and months to now days and hours, and that's facilitated by people taking more and more risk. And part of that is, to touch on news, is you'd see a huge increase in people who pass an evaluation account, they'd probably trade quite sensibly, take a bit of time, take 10, 15, 20 trades. And then all of a sudden they'd go all in over NFP or CPR or something like that. So you were seeing people just coming in wanting to gamble. And that's caused a lot of stress for firms. And one of the way firms done, some firms have banned news trading, said you can't take a trade 2 minutes before or after. Some firms will let you trade the evaluation on news, but not the funded account. And some have said sort of things like they'll take the profit away over news and things like that. We're not doing that because we want to put as few rules and restrictions as possible on traders. But it comes with an implied sense of responsibility. It's like, I'll let you news trade, but you can't just go 50 lots on the NASDAQ over news. That's not going to be acceptable. So we're hoping traders will understand that. And we're only talking about a relatively small minority who abuse, but it makes a big difference. Whereas other firms have said, look, we're going to introduce some programs where you're going to have a daily profit cap, which is similar to what the futures sort of prop space has. And I guess we'll see how people sort of take and receive that. From my point of view, I don't want to put any rules on people and I want to trust people. But clearly, it's trying to address the same thing, and it's these highest risk of traders who are going to spoil it for everyone else by just punting them, because you just can't manage the risk because they're just too unpredictable, this top 1% of people. So that's how other firms are approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, from a trader's point of view, and obviously the way the industry has been evolving the last couple of years, I've seen such a change in the last 3 to 4 months on the influx of, one, gamblers, and two, like gangs of like news traders.
Yeah, I mean, I think because you've got such a large group of people interested in funding trading, you've got a lot of core people who are actually ambitious and want to be traders and understand trading, that it's a longer term journey. It's not get rich quick. And then you found people who have figured out that they can potentially abuse the sort of setup, small upfront fee, pass their account, and then
win-win,
go
isn't it?
Yeah, and you get people who, you sort of alluded to reverse hedging, reverse trading, cross firms and individual firms, which is pretty easy to spot. So people aren't going to get away with it. Firms are very sophisticated to it now. They'll pass an evaluation, and one will go short on gold, one will go long on gold, and all these tricks are getting sort of...
What's your thoughts on this whole social media era we're coming into now?
Yeah, I've never been one to sort of have a Twitter account and things like that, which is fine. If people want to do it, that's fine. But I don't want to be getting in internet drama, as the kids would call it, or beef. That's the one, isn't it? Internet beef.
CEO beef.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that type of thing. I think we've always tried to treat people fairly and well. I think if people do end up going to that degree, they've probably been quite unreasonable. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because you want to make things right with people, and if people are generally disgruntled, even if it's a misunderstanding on their part, we always try and extend some goodwill. But at the same time, you have people who try and leverage it. They'll inbox me and they'll say, look, if you don't give me a free account, you don't do this, I'll go on Trustpilot, I'll go on Twitter and things like that. And it's like, we'll do so.
It's the blackmail point though, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And there's only a small minority of people who do it. But I think with the industry collectively shifting to want to move away from gamblers and super high-risk people, then if the whole industry is shifting, then it's a case of these people won't have a home anymore, and it'll just be left to the majority of sensible traders. So I do care deeply about our reputation and our trust and stuff like that, but I won't be leveraged, and I won't...
Yeah, rightly so, though.
Yeah, I won't be put over a barrel for someone who's been unreasonable. But at the same time, we do care about making sure people are happy.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a small minority, but like, obviously, I do look over social medias for Funded Trading Plus.
Yeah,
and you just see.
I don't. You see, it stresses you. It stresses you out. As I'm like, nah, I watch it. I'm reading that.
And we've got a really solid every time I open social, it's very positive and stuff. And then every now and again, you'll see the minority, or I see it for other firms. Firms who have come and gone and. And I just want to touch upon that dead briefly as well, because I know we want to cover it in more detail like further down the line. But what is your thoughts on big named companies collapsing out of nowhere?
More to come. Yeah, I mean, I've got some inside information, gossip with senior people in the industry, and there's quite a few firms under serious financial stress at the moment. There's ones who are trying to raise capital. And things like that. And the issue with the industry was the race to the bottom. It was like, you do program modeling, you can model your risk and stuff like that, and you can sort of figure out where your sort of safe zone is. That's like a sustainable model, which is what we always did. We were never bothered about being the biggest. We were like, longevity was always important to us. Whereas other firms were like, I want to be the next FTMO and stuff like that. And it's
can't
like,
compete, can you?
Well, it's like, it's not going to happen. They've been around for so many years. And even they, have had to introduce pretty strict gambling rules and things like that because they're obviously under pressure in that respect. So we're in a very solid situation because we created realistic programs for long term, whereas other people were just giving these more and more generous conditions. It was like more drawdown, more
12%,
smaller profit targets, and it was like you can higher leverage. I never understand why 100-to-1 leverage. That was nonsense to me. But and it was just ever bigger discounts and ever bigger program sizes, and it was never sustainable. It was clearly
70% off I seen the other day, and then like a week later the firm was closed down. I thought that's naughty though.
Exactly. And that's the problem with the lack of regulation in the industry. You can get people who rug pull and things like that, and it's just not the way to do business. Whereas we've always been like, well, we'll be here to stay. We're never going to give the most generous programs. We're never going to be the cheapest, but we're always going to be in a position where if you stick to the rules, you'll get paid out.
So do you know how other firms are now starting to impose daily profit targets, different models, smaller drawdowns, all these anti-gambling rules, because these are firms who have static drawdown programs? Is that where Funded Trading Plus, from the get-go, from day one, even though they might have received like a bit of stick over the years going, why are you trading drawdown or why are you relative until you turn static, is that now where the image and perception of what is a sustainable model is changing to?
No, you're right there. I mean, it's always a sliding scale of the same variables. You just need to decide whether you want to be here or something like that. But no, the trading drawdown allowed us to not have any other rules. It allowed us to not have time limits. We were the first to do that back in 2021. It allowed us to do day one withdrawals that we still have, whereas generally the longer you make someone to do a withdrawal, the less likely they are to withdraw. So I never saw a good reason to do that. So we've always had day one withdrawals, and we've always had the same leverage. And I knew that going forward, it was always going to be a model that we could sustain and we could always work and we could justify. It's like, well, okay, we'll give you fully static drawdown, but then we need to adjust other parameters. So it's just pros and cons and giving people a choice. But I think at the moment, when we're seeing such volatility with firms and we're just staying pretty much exactly the same, I think it's a pretty positive thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I was trying to say. Sorry, is that the image now is very quickly reversing. So my big and final question is, 6 months from now, 1 year from now, do you believe the prop industry, the funded trading landscape, is going to look a lot different than it does right now today in terms of static drawdown? You see in the start of the daily limits and stuff. Do you believe the industry will look like that in a year's time?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think if you look at you compare it to the futures space, the futures prop space was more established than the FX prop space up until a couple of years ago. And that's always had really strict rules, always had really, really strict rules, like trailing relative on equity. So,
and then
it was really restrictive on payouts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think we'll get close to that. We don't need to get any, I don't think we necessarily need to get closer, but the industry needs to get closer to that to make something sustainable. It's a case of, like, how do you give quality traders who you're going to be able to monetize room to breathe, room to express themselves, to put it in almost an artistic way, and at the same time deter the people who just aren't traders and who are going to punt and gamble. And that's the balance that everyone needs to find. We're experimenting with it at the moment, just trying to get rid of the highest risk traders who are doing like silly things over NFP and things like that. And other firms are approaching it in different ways. I really don't want to put rules on people. I want people just to be able to have a sensible sort of risk management plan, and just sort of, I mean, what I say to people is just aim to retain your account for the long term. If you do that, everything takes care of itself. It's like, what's the max lot size? What's the max leverage? What's the max, and all this type, what's the max risk I can do? It's a case of, well, you need to figure that out for yourself. But if you have the overarching goal of, I want to keep this funded account for the next few months, potentially even longer with some people, then you're generally going to manage your risk in a sensible way. Whereas a lot of people, they'll have their account now, blow it up, they'll just get in this toxic spin of evaluation pass punt, and that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, I see it in Discord all the time. Like, I'll see people saying, "Oh, I passed my challenge. Look, NFP's on today, or CPI's on tomorrow night. Like, when am I going to get my account?" And as soon as they ask that question, you just know that they're just not going to keep their account for long. And then you'll see them like a week later or a couple of days later going, "Oh, my 2-pip stop loss didn't trigger." And it's like, oh, do you know what I mean? This is a nightmare. And I think because we have so few rules in terms of, look, you can trade news. It doesn't mean that we're walking around saying trade news. Where we recommend you don't trade news. But if you're like a swing trader who's holding position from Monday, Tuesday high, the week low, the week whatever, and it comes to Friday and they've got a position open, that's fine. But
P&L just rock it up or rock it down. And I get it. And we ran a live trade room for 10 years before we did Funded Trading Plus. So I understand, deeply how traders behave, how they feel, and the emotions behind it. Because I've been through them all myself. I used to have loads of smashed up IKEA desks because I'd just have like this dreadful result. I'm like, bang, and it was just, and so maybe, traders don't want to necessarily put the time and work and effort into being sustainable. I promise you, once you get to that position where you are managing your risk sensibly and you're making sustainable long-term gains and you're not flipping between these highs and lows emotions, it's a bit more in a controllable range. It becomes so much more rewarding, but it's just trying to communicate that message and actually convince people that's the case. I half wish we still did a live trade room, really. It's a shame Discord doesn't allow me to screen, to project to more than like 50 people or something. We do like 50,000 people or whatever, do like a big live trading session and just sort of talk to people about it. And that would be great. I think
that's an idea for the future.
It might be, yeah. Might dip into that again, although I'm super busy. But it'd be nice just to be able to do that and say, look, here's how you want to, not that I'm some amazing trader, but it's like, here's how you position size appropriately on a funded account.
The foundation.
Yeah, here's how we want to be trading. So yeah, maybe we'll dip into that again in the future.
Nice. I think that's a really good place to leave this episode. So yeah, really good question from Amar. And yeah, the future looks interesting for sure. All I can say is that Funded Trading Plus is here to stay, and let's just see how this landscape changes over the next 6 or 12 months. But thanks a lot for your feedback today, Simon, and thank you guys at home. We will catch you on the next episode.